Cynthia Patrick was born into a humble but respectable household, the only daughter of Leonard and Evelyn Patrick. Her father, a man of sharp intellect and discipline, taught history at a local secondary school, and her mother owned a small but cherished bakery that sat at the corner of their street. The bakery was a heart of community, a place where neighbors gathered for Evelyn's pastries and gentle words. Growing up, Cynthia was surrounded by love, structure, and encouragement. Her parents never allowed financial limitations to rob her of ambition. They often reminded her that integrity and resilience could build more lasting wealth than inheritance. Cynthia absorbed these lessons with gratitude, shaping her into a young woman of quiet strength and determination. From an early age, Cynthia showed remarkable promise. She loved reading biographies of leaders, entrepreneurs, and visionaries, often staying up late to study their journeys. Her curiosity extended beyond the classroom. She volunteered at her mother's bakery, where she learned how discipline and passion created loyal customers. She developed a natural business instinct, memorizing what pastries sold best, suggesting ways to display them attractively, and even helping with bookkeeping as she grew older. Her father, proud of her sharp mind, often challenged her with intellectual debates during dinner. These experiences instilled in Cynthia not just knowledge, but confidence in her ability to contribute meaningfully to any endeavor she pursued. Her hobbies reflected her balance. She adored sketching dresses and gowns during her free time, losing herself in the world of design, while also finding joy in playing the piano, a gift from her grandmother. As she entered university, Cynthia stood out for her grace and ambition. She pursued business administration, determined to merge her academic knowledge with her passion for design and entrepreneurship. Though she came from a modest background, she carried herself with elegance, earning admiration from professors and peers alike. Cynthia was not the loudest voice in the room, but when she spoke, her clarity and conviction commanded attention. Her vision was clear. She wanted to build a fashion brand that would represent dignity, creativity, and timeless elegance. She dreamed of opening boutiques across major cities, creating opportunities for young talents, and giving her parents the comfort they had sacrificed so much for. Despite financial struggles, she thrived through scholarships and part-time jobs, balancing academics, work, and her creative sketches. Cynthia's life before marriage was defined by hope, purpose, and a steady march toward greatness, a journey sculpted by her family's values and her unrelenting desire to leave a mark on the world. Solomon Vincent came from a family known for its wealth and influence. His father, Richard Vincent, was a highly successful real estate developer with properties spread across Europe, while his mother, Helena, was a socialite who moved gracefully within elite circles. Solomon was their only son, groomed from childhood to inherit not only the fortune, but also the responsibility of maintaining the family's prestigious name. He had been sent to the best schools, polished in etiquette, and encouraged to excel in both academics and sports. With a tall build, dark wavy hair, and an aura of confidence, he quickly learned how to command attention in any setting. Though he appeared humble to outsiders, he carried within him the pride of someone who had always known privilege. Yet beneath his confident exterior, there was a restless hunger, a desire to prove himself not just as his father's heir, but as a man who could win respect on his own terms. Solomon first noticed Cynthia at a university networking seminar, where young entrepreneurs were invited to share their ideas and ambitions. While most attendees were eager to impress with loud, flashy pitches, Cynthia's calm, clear presentation about building a sustainable fashion line stood out. She spoke with conviction. Her passion reflected in the sketches she displayed, and unlike others, she seemed less concerned with impressing and more intent on sharing a vision. Solomon was captivated. Used to women who were dazzled by his wealth and family name, he found Cynthia's composure refreshing. She did not chase his attention. Instead, she seemed almost indifferent to the fact that one of the richest young men in the room was watching her closely. That very indifference became his obsession. He approached her with his signature charm, striking up conversations about business, but also gently weaving in personal interests, sports, books, and travel. Each time, Cynthia responded politely, never giving him more than he earned, and that restraint made him want her even more. Determined to win her heart, Solomon began a deliberate pursuit. He offered to help her gain contacts in the fashion industry, invited her to exclusive dinners, and impressed her parents by supporting local community projects near their home. For Cynthia, it was overwhelming at first. She had never been the target of such attention from a man so powerful and admired. Yet, she couldn't deny the way his words sometimes stirred her heart. nor the charm in the way he seemed genuinely curious about her dreams. Solomon's persistence was relentless, but he carried it with grace. Surprise flowers after her presentations, thoughtful gifts like rare books on fashion, and endless encouragement when she doubted herself. Over time, his presence became difficult to ignore. Against the careful caution her parents advised, Cynthia found herself softening, caught between admiration and a budding affection. Solomon had won many things in his life through power and influence, but with Cynthia, he discovered a more subtle victory, winning her trust and, eventually, her heart. Sharon Frank grew up in a very different world from Cynthia. Born into a struggling household in the industrial outskirts of Manchester, she was the eldest of 4 siblings. Her father, Gerald Frank, was a mechanic whose small garage never seemed to yield enough income, while her mother, Diana, worked long hours as a hospital cleaner. Sharon learned early that beauty and cunning could open doors faster than hard work ever could. Though she was intelligent, her ambitions were fueled less by creativity and more by envy. She despised the hardships of her childhood, the second-hand clothes, the cramped apartment, the constant struggle to pay bills. Watching wealthy women stroll through the city with confidence and luxury only ignited her resolve. She would escape poverty at all costs, and she would do it by attaching herself to wealth and influence. From her teenage years, Sharon sharpened her skills in manipulation. She became acutely aware of her allure, her striking dark eyes, her curvaceous figure, her bold laugh that could command a room. While Cynthia nurtured dreams built on talent and resilience, Sharon crafted strategies built on seduction and deception. She pursued relationships not out of affection, but out of calculation. Men were stepping stones, and she studied in the way a hunter studies prey, what they wanted, how they thought, and how they could be controlled. She envied women like Cynthia, who carried themselves with natural grace and ambition, because she knew she could never compete on merit. To Sharon, merit was irrelevant. She believed in shortcuts, in seizing what others work hard to build. She carried within her a silent resentment, especially toward women who had things she didn't: family stability, genuine love, and dignified ambition. When Sharon first encountered Solomon Vincent, it was not at a business event, but at an exclusive charity gala her friend had managed to sneak her into. She noticed immediately the way people hovered around him, the way he commanded respect effortlessly, and above all, the wealth he represented. Her instincts sharpened. This was the kind of man she had always envisioned for herself, a golden ticket out of mediocrity. But soon she realized something else. Solomon's gaze often wandered towards Cynthia, the modest yet elegant woman who seemed untouched by the shallow glitz of the evening. That discovery lit a flame of envy within Sharon that burned fiercely. Cynthia embodied everything Sharon secretly resented: class, dignity, ambition, and now the attention of the very man she wanted for herself. From that night on, Sharon made a silent vow. If Cynthia thought she could hold on to Solomon with her grace and ambition, she was mistaken. Sharon's hidden agenda was set in motion. She would insert herself into Solomon's life, exploit his weaknesses, and slowly unravel Cynthia's hold on him until the spotlight, the wealth, and the man were hers. The wedding of Cynthia Patrick and Solomon Vincent was nothing short of a spectacle. Held at a grand cathedral in central London, it drew dignitaries, entrepreneurs, fashion icons, and society's elite. Guests marveled at the sheer elegance of the event. Ivory roses lined the aisles, chandeliers sparkled like stars above, and a string quartet filled the air with music that felt timeless. Cynthia looked breathtaking in a custom gown she had designed herself, a flowing piece of silk embroidered with subtle golden patterns that spoke of her creativity. Solomon, tall and proud, stood beside her in a tailored tuxedo, exuding the charm of a man who had everything: wealth, power, and now the admiration of marrying a woman beloved for her grace and potential. To the public, they were the perfect couple, a union destined to thrive and inspire. Yet beneath the polished smiles, shadows lingered, unnoticed by the excited crowd. For Cynthia, that day was a realization of a dream she had dared to believe in. She looked at Solomon and thought she saw a man who respected her vision and shared her ambition. Her heart swelled with hope that together they would build not only a family, but also an empire, each supporting the other in their passions. She envisioned opening her first fashion house with his backing, while also being his partner in philanthropy and business. But what she couldn't see was a quiet envy burning in Sharon Frank, who sat in the audience, invited through connections Solomon barely remembered. Sharon watched every detail of the ceremony, her smile polite, but her thoughts venomous. To her, Cynthia was basking in a light that should have been hers, enjoying luxuries Sharon believed she was more entitled to, while guests whispered admiration about the new Mrs. Vincent. Sharon plotted silently, her ambition growing sharper with every vow exchanged at the altar. After the ceremony, the reception was held in a luxurious ballroom where crystal glasses clinked and laughter filled the air. Solomon danced with Cynthia, making her feel as though she was the only woman in the world, but Sharon's piercing gaze never left them. She maneuvered through the crowd, introducing herself to influential guests, already weaving herself into their circle. To many, she seemed just another charming attendee, but behind her graceful gestures lay her hidden agenda. Sharon had no intention of remaining an outsider watching Cynthia live the life she wanted. She vowed to chip away at Cynthia's marriage, waiting for cracks to show, ready to position herself as the woman Solomon truly needed. In that glittering ballroom, while Cynthia held Solomon's hand with love, Sharon clenched a glass of champagne with envy, her silent promise echoing louder in her heart than the music around her. The early days of Cynthia and Solomon's marriage painted a picture of splendor, but slowly, tiny cracks began to appear beneath the polished surface. At first, Cynthia noticed subtle shifts, Solomon's increasing impatience with her schedule, his dismissive tone when she spoke about her fashion ambitions, and his growing obsession with projecting an image of dominance in the business world, where he had once admired her independence. He now wanted her to play a more subdued role, as if her ambitions threatened his pride. Cynthia would return from a long day of work and study to find him cold, his attention fixed on his phone or business associates rather than on her. She tried to reason with herself that all marriages had adjustments, yet in her heart, unease grew. For Solomon, his wealth and influence became a weapon he wielded without hesitation, and though Cynthia resisted, his arrogance only deepened. In this fragile space, Sharon Frank seized her opportunity. Her encounters with Solomon were carefully orchestrated, whether at charity luncheons, business conferences, or high-profile galas. She made sure to appear when he was most vulnerable. Sharon was clever. She never came across as too eager, instead cloaking herself in subtle admiration, laughter at his jokes, and whispered suggestions that fueled his ego. She knew exactly what strings to pull, highlighting Cynthia's independence as a flaw, planting doubts that his wife's ambitions were overshadowing him. "A man like you deserves a woman who puts him first," she said once at a dinner party, her eyes locking with his in a way that made the words linger long after she had walked away. Solomon, who had begun to resent Cynthia's unyielding spirit, found Sharon's carefully disguised flattery intoxicating. She became a mirror reflecting back the greatness he wanted to believe about himself. At home, Cynthia felt a shift. Solomon's temper grew sharper, his absences longer, his explanations vaguer. He began dismissing her ideas about opening a small fashion boutique, claiming it was not the right time, or worse, that it was unnecessary since he could provide everything she needed. Cynthia, though hurt, refused to abandon her dreams. She sketched late into the night, pouring her emotions into designs that symbolized both love and betrayal. Sharon, meanwhile, continued her quiet pursuit, ensuring that whenever Solomon sought escape from the pressures of home and business, she was there with a smile, a compliment, or a glass of wine. Each interaction chipped away at his loyalty, eroding the foundation Cynthia had believed so strongly in. The tensions rose like storm clouds, and while the world still saw a golden couple, a storm of arrogance, temptation, and manipulation was gathering just beyond the eyes of the public. The night of the annual Vincent Foundation Gala was meant to be a celebration. Cynthia had spent weeks preparing, selecting a gown of her own design, a floor-length emerald silk dress that captured attention without being ostentatious. She envisioned the evening as a chance to present herself not only as Solomon's wife, but also as a woman of substance, someone capable of standing in her own light. Guests gathered in the opulent ballroom, the clinking of champagne glasses mingling with the notes of a live orchestra. Politicians, business tycoons, and socialites filled the room, their eyes drawn to the powerful Vincent family. But what should have been Cynthia's moment of pride turned into the deepest humiliation of her life. As she walked toward Solomon, ready to introduce him to potential partners who had shown interest in her budding fashion sketches, Sharon Frank appeared at his side, draped in a shimmering silver gown that hugged her figure. She leaned into Solomon as though she belonged there, her laughter carrying across the room. At first, Cynthia thought it was a cruel coincidence, but her heart dropped when Solomon placed a hand on Sharon's back, guiding her forward with a kind of intimacy that left no room for doubt. Guests exchanged glances, whispers rippling like wildfire through the hall. Sharon's eyes met Cynthia's for a brief, triumphant moment, cold, victorious, and unapologetic. Solomon, instead of defending his wife, smiled at Sharon's words and openly dismissed Cynthia's presence with a careless wave of his hand, as if she were an inconvenient shadow lingering too close. The humiliation reached its peak when a reporter asked Solomon to pose for a photograph with his wife. Instead of calling Cynthia forward, Solomon slipped his arm around Sharon's waist and posed with cameras, his arrogance unmasked. Flashbulbs lit the room, immortalizing Cynthia's disgrace as she stood frozen among the crowd. The betrayal was no longer whispered gossip, but a spectacle, witnessed by the city's most influential figures. Cynthia's chest tightened, tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She straightened her shoulders, her dignity her only shield, and walked out of the ballroom without a word. Behind her, laughter and chatter resumed, as though nothing had happened. Solomon had made his choice, and Sharon had claimed her victory in the most public way possible. It was a night Cynthia's marriage shattered, not in silence, but under the unrelenting gaze of society. The weeks following the gala were suffocating for Cynthia. Newspapers splashed photographs of Solomon and Sharon across their pages, with headlines praising their bold new romance. What society saw as glamorous, Cynthia experienced as a crushing storm. She returned to her parents' home, her dignity in tatters, her name whispered with pity in social circles that once admired her. Friends who had once called her elegant now avoided her, unwilling to be associated with scandal. Each morning, she awoke to another tabloid article dissecting her marriage, another photograph of Solomon and Sharon attending events together as if she had never existed. For Cynthia, the betrayal was not only personal, it was public, engraved into the memory of an unforgiving city. Solomon, growing more arrogant with each day, wasted no time severing their bond. He filed for divorce swiftly, his lawyers drafting terms that reduced Cynthia to nothing more than a disposable figure. The documents arrived in a sleek envelope, delivered without ceremony, as though their years together were nothing but a contract expired. Cynthia sat at the dining table with her parents, staring at the papers, her heart pounding. Leonard, her father, urged her to fight for her rights, while Evelyn wept quietly, devastated by the cruelty shown to their daughter. Yet Cynthia, though broken, refused to beg or battle for scraps. She signed the papers with a steady hand, whispering only to herself, "You may take my marriage, but you will not take my spirit." It was her way of reclaiming dignity in the face of humiliation. On the day the divorce was finalized in court, Cynthia walked out into the gray drizzle of the city, her future uncertain. Sharon stood at Solomon's side, smug and victorious, as photographers captured the moment. Solomon barely glanced at Cynthia, his arm wrapped proudly around the mistress who had become his new prize. Cynthia, however, did not falter. She held her head high, her eyes dry, her silence louder than any word she could have spoken. Though the law declared her free from Solomon Vincent, the scars of betrayal cut deep. Yet within her heart, a quiet ember of determination burned. She did not yet know how, but she promised herself that this end would not define her story. Somewhere beyond the ashes of her shattered marriage, a new beginning waited to be written. Life after the divorce was an abyss Cynthia had never imagined. The elegant home she once shared with Solomon was gone. The friends who once surrounded her had drifted away, and the city that once whispered admiration now pitted her with hushed tones. Nights were the hardest. She would lie awake in her childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling as tears soaked her pillow. The silence was deafening, a reminder that the life she had built with dreams of love and partnership had been ripped apart in full view of the world. Each morning she forced herself out of bed, not for herself but for her parents, who watched her with helpless worry. Though Evelyn tried to cheer her with warm meals and Leonard offered words of strength, Cynthia felt the crushing weight of loneliness pressing against her chest. She smiled for them, but inside she was crumbling, struggling to find a reason to keep moving. Her isolation deepened when invitations to events stopped arriving, and old acquaintances no longer answered her calls. The world of prestige she had once been welcomed into now treated her like an outcast. Cynthia turned to her sketches, pouring her pain into designs that reflected heartbreak and endurance. Yet even this outlet could not fully fill the void. What gnawed at her most was the cruel truth that her marriage had ended without giving her the one thing she had longed for, a family of her own. She had dreamed of children, of raising them with love and integrity, of building a future that combined her career with motherhood. Now, that dream seemed as shattered as her reputation. But in the midst of despair, she remembered the decision she and Solomon had once made before their marriage had fractured, to freeze embryos as part of their family planning. The memory lit a fragile spark inside her. With determination born from pain, Cynthia began to consider a path that few around her would understand. Quietly, without sharing her plan even with her parents, she contacted the fertility clinic where the embryos were stored. She knew society would judge her harshly, whispering that she was desperate or clinging to the remnants of a broken marriage. But Cynthia saw it differently. To her, it was not about Solomon anymore. It was about reclaiming her right to be a mother, to bring into the world a part of herself untainted by betrayal. It was a secret plan, one she guarded fiercely, a seed of hope she nurtured in silence. Amid her loneliness, she envisioned cradling a child who would remind her that life could still bloom even in the aftermath of ruin. The struggle remained heavy, the loneliness sharp, but within Cynthia, the quiet courage to rewrite her story had begun to take root. Cynthia's decision to move forward with her secret plan gave her a renewed sense of purpose. But survival demanded more than determination. It demanded action. Her parents' modest home was safe, yet she knew she could not remain there forever, defined by the shadow of her failed marriage. She began applying for work, determined to stand on her own feet despite the whispers that followed her name. It wasn't easy. Many employers hesitated to take her seriously, assuming she was fragile or scandal-stained. After countless rejections, she finally secured a position as an assistant at a small fashion consultancy in the city. Though far from the empire she had once dreamed of, the role allowed her to sharpen her skills, regain her confidence, and most importantly, begin creating again. Every sketch she submitted, every project she worked on, reminded her that her identity was not tied to Solomon's betrayal, but to her own resilience. It was during one of these consultancy projects, a collaboration with a luxury department store, that Cynthia first met Alexander Hayes. Alexander was an entrepreneur in his mid-30s, a man who had built his fortune in tech and later expanded into retail investments. Unlike Solomon, who wore his wealth like a crown, Alexander carried his success with understated confidence. His dark eyes were observant, his voice calm, and his approach to people refreshingly respectful. He noticed Cynthia during presentation, impressed not by her beauty, though it was undeniable, but by the clarity and creativity in her ideas. While others in the room spoke over her, Alexander listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that made her feel valued. For Cynthia, the attention was unsettling at first. She had grown used to being overlooked or pitted. Yet here was a man treating her as an equal, not a broken remnant of a failed marriage. Over the weeks that followed, Alexander found reasons to involve Cynthia in more projects, offering mentorship without overstepping boundaries. He admired her resilience, even when she tried to hide her pain behind a composed smile. Their conversations often drifted beyond business. They spoke of books, music, and the quiet strength that took to rise after a fall. Slowly, Cynthia began to relax in his presence, surprised by how natural it felt to laugh again. She didn't see him as a savior. Her secret plan for motherhood reminded her she was building her life for herself, but she recognized him as someone who genuinely respected her journey. For Alexander, Cynthia represented something rare, a woman shaped by fire yet unwilling to let the flames consume her. For Cynthia, Alexander became a reminder that her life was not over, that new beginnings could emerge even from ashes. It wasn't yet love, but it was a spark that hinted at the possibility of healing and a future beyond betrayal. Solomon Vincent basked in the illusion of triumph. With Cynthia gone, Sharon became his constant companion, parading on his arm at every gala, business meeting, and media appearance. To the outside world, they were a dazzling couple, young, glamorous, and unapologetically in love. Sharon played her part well, flaunting designer gowns and sparkling jewelry, ensuring cameras captured her every angle. Solomon, inflated by the admiration, failed to see that Sharon's devotion was rooted not in love, but in the hunger for status. While Cynthia spent her night sketching quietly at her desk, Solomon and Sharon splurged on yachts in Monaco, vacations in the Maldives, and extravagant parties that made headlines. Yet beneath the sheen of luxury, subtle cracks began to emerge. Sharon grew increasingly dissatisfied with playing the supportive role. She craved more attention, more validation, and when Solomon was consumed by work, she sought admiration elsewhere. Their relationship, though glamorous, was built on vanity and deception. Behind closed doors, Solomon found Sharon's demands exhausting. She pushed for larger homes, more vacations, and even encouraged him to distance himself from his parents, claiming they interfered too much. Though Solomon gave in to many of her whims, he found himself growing restless. He missed the quiet stability Cynthia once offered, even if he would never admit it. Sharon, meanwhile, relished her newfound influence but despised being in Cynthia's shadow. No matter how many jewels Solomon bought her, whispers of comparison followed. Society still remembered Cynthia's elegance, her dignity, and her poise. Sharon burned with envy, masking it with sharper claws of seduction and manipulation to keep Solomon close. Still, when the lights dimmed and the parties ended, their bond was nothing more than a brittle facade. The world applauded them, but the world also watched. Business partners noticed Solomon's growing arrogance, his careless spending, and the influence Sharon seemed to exert over him. What appeared to be a golden life was in fact a gilded cage. Sharon believed she had secured her place as the woman of Solomon's future, but beneath her glittering smile, she feared Cynthia's ghost lingered, haunting Solomon's silence, his occasional detachment, his moment of thought when he looked away from her. And deep down, she knew she had not truly won Solomon's heart. She had merely captured his pride. Cynthia's secret plan finally came to fruition. After months of quiet consultations and emotional turbulence, she welcomed not one child but two beautiful twins who carried her features and a reminder of the life she had once dreamed of. The day she held them in her arms, she felt a love so profound that the pain of betrayal momentarily dissolved. Her parents wept with joy, embracing their grandchildren as a new hope for family. For Cynthia, the twins became her anchor. Every sleepless night, every cry, every smile reminded her that her story was far from over. Raising them alone was not easy. Financial constraints pressed heavily on her, and balancing motherhood with her growing career at the consultancy tested her strength. But each challenge only deepened her resolve. She whispered to her children promises of a future where they would never feel abandoned or unwanted. Naming them was her quiet act of defiance. She chose names that spoke of resilience and grace, deliberately refusing to tie them to Solomon in any way. Though the embryos carried his DNA, she considered the twins hers alone. They were born from her strength, her choices, her sacrifice. She shielded them fiercely, ensuring no one outside her family and the closest circle of friends knew of their existence. The world still painted her as a forgotten ex-wife, but in her private life, Cynthia thrived in the glow of motherhood. Every milestone, the first step, the first word, the first laugh, was a treasure, a symbol of life rising from ashes. The secrecy was not just about pride. It was protection. She knew Solomon and Sharon's lives were splashed across every tabloid, and the last thing she wanted was her children caught in that circus. Cynthia worked tirelessly, saving every penny, building her career brick by brick, and sketching late into the night to fuel her fashion dreams. Her children became her muse. Her designs reflected resilience, rebirth, and love. Though loneliness still echoed in her quiet moments, her twins filled the silence with purpose. Cynthia was no longer just a woman healing from betrayal. She was a mother crafting a legacy for two lives that depended entirely on her strength. Alexander Hayes' presence in Cynthia's life became a steady current of reassurance. He admired her resilience but never intruded on her private world, respecting her boundaries even as he grew closer. Slowly, however, Cynthia began to allow him into her reality. She confided in him about her struggles balancing work and family, carefully revealing the existence of her twins. To her surprise, Alexander's reaction was neither judgment nor hesitation. Instead, he smiled warmly, promising to stand by her as a friend and ally, no matter how complicated her life seemed. His acceptance was a balm Cynthia hadn't realized she needed. Unlike Solomon, Alexander never sought control or diminish her. Instead, he encouraged her, helping her explore opportunities for her designs beyond consultancy. His influence became invaluable when he introduced her to a network of investors interested in emerging talent. With his guidance, Cynthia began preparing her first independent collection, pouring her creativity and pain into designs that resonated with raw honesty. Alexander admired not only her work, but also her devotion to her children. On weekends, he would visit her parents' home, bringing thoughtful gifts for the twins, reading stories to them, or simply giving Cynthia the chance to rest while he entertained them with his easy charm. He never tried to replace their father. Instead, he offered the steady presence of a man who understood loyalty and integrity. Cynthia, though cautious, felt her walls beginning to lower. She wasn't ready to give her heart again, but she recognized Alexander's sincerity. There was no arrogance, no pretense, no hidden agenda. With him, she felt seen for who she truly was. Not Solomon's discarded wife, not society's scandal, but Cynthia Patrick, a woman of vision, strength, and love. Their bond deepened, forming a foundation of trust that quietly hinted at the possibility of something greater. 5 years after the divorce, Destiny staged its cruel theater. The city buzzed with anticipation for a prestigious charity gala, one attended by the elite, the powerful, and the celebrated. Cynthia, now established with her first collection gaining recognition, was invited as an honored designer. She arrived gracefully, her twins by her side, dressed in miniature outfits she had crafted herself, turning heads with their innocence and charm. Cynthia's quiet dignity and elegance stunned the crowd, many of whom had last seen her as the humiliated ex-wife. Whispers rose instantly, questions swirling. Who are the children? How did she rise again? Across the ballroom, Solomon entered with Sharon on his arm. Sharon glowing with a pregnancy she flaunted like a crown. They moved with arrogance, assuming the spotlight would be theirs, until Solomon's eyes froze on Cynthia. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Sharon followed his gaze and nearly choked on her pride when she saw Cynthia, radiant and unbroken, flanked by 2 children who bore an uncanny resemblance to Solomon. The air thickened with tension as murmurs spread, journalists raising cameras, eager to capture the silent confrontation. Sharon tightened her grip on Solomon, whispering assurances meant to mask her panic. Solomon, however, could not look away. The twins' presence shattered his carefully constructed narrative that Cynthia had been left broken and irrelevant. Cynthia, unfazed by their stares, simply smiled for the cameras, holding her children close. Without a word, she reminded them, an entire world, that she had not only survived but thrived. The balance of power shifted in that instant, leaving Sharon shaken and Solomon reeling. The aftermath of the gala was explosive. Newspapers headlined Cynthia's return, speculating endlessly about the twins. Some claimed they were adopted. Others whispered they were the product of her marriage to Solomon. The resemblance, however, was undeniable. Business associates questioned Solomon privately, some even mocking him for abandoning a woman who had risen stronger than before. Sharon, once adored for her beauty, now found herself scrutinized and compared mercilessly to Cynthia, whose elegance and strength captivated the public once more. Invitations shifted. Where Sharon had once been a favored guest, Cynthia became the name society sought to honor. In social circles, the whispers were relentless. Cynthia, however, maintained her composure, never offering explanations. Her silence was strategic, leaving others to draw their conclusions. Alexander's presence at her side fueled speculation that she had moved on with a man of influence, further unsettling Solomon. For Sharon, jealousy burned like wildfire. She could not bear the fact that the woman she had worked so hard to humiliate now stood taller, with children who made her pregnancy seem almost irrelevant. Behind closed doors, Sharon lashed out at Solomon, accusing him of still harboring feelings for Cynthia. Solomon, frustrated and defensive, could not silence the gnawing doubt inside him. He had chosen Sharon, humiliated Cynthia, and yet here he was, reduced to a man haunted by the sight of twins who carried a smile. The whispers of society became more than gossip. They became a mirror reflecting the truth he desperately wanted to deny. The cracks in Solomon and Sharon's relationship widened into an unbridgeable chasm. Journalists digging into Sharon's past uncovered whispers of her secret affairs, relationships with men she had entertained while Solomon traveled. One name surfaced repeatedly, a wealthy art dealer with whom Sharon had been seen in Paris months before her pregnancy announcement. At first, Solomon dismissed the rumors, but when evidence emerged, photographs, messages, hotel receipts, he could no longer ignore the truth. Sharon's pregnancy, the very thing she flaunted to assert her dominance over Cynthia, was thrown into doubt. When confronted, Sharon exploded in anger, accusing Solomon of hypocrisy, of daring to judge her when he himself had betrayed Cynthia. But her fury only confirmed his suspicions. For the first time, Solomon felt the sting of betrayal from the woman he had sacrificed everything for. The world that once celebrated their union now mocked it as a hollow partnership built on lies. Business partners began distancing themselves, wary of Solomon's poor judgment and Sharon's scandals. Their empire of luxury crumbled, and with it, Solomon's pride. For Cynthia, the revelation was a quiet victory. She had never sought revenge, Yet fate had delivered it without her lifting a hand. Watching from afar, she focused on her children and career, refusing to let the chaos of Solomon and Sharon's downfall disrupt the peace she had built. Her silence remained her most powerful weapon, one that spoke louder than any accusation. As the scandals multiplied, Solomon's empire began to collapse. Investors pulled out of deals, contracts were canceled, and his reputation as a disciplined businessman disintegrated. Sharon, realizing the walls were closing in, distanced herself, spending more time abroad under guise of rest. Alone, Solomon found himself battling financial ruin. His once unshakable confidence eroded. The same social circles that had applauded him for abandoning Cynthia now whispered about his failures, comparing his fall to Cynthia's rise. For a man who had built his identity on pride and appearances, the humiliation was unbearable. At night, he drank heavily, haunted by images of Cynthia and the twins. The thought that they were his children gnawed at him, though he lacked the courage to confront Cynthia directly. His parents, ashamed of his decisions, withdrew their support, urging him to take responsibility for the mess he had created. Solomon was left isolated, stripped of the arrogance that once shielded him. His downfall became a public spectacle. Tabloids that once idolized him now savored every misstep, every debt, every scandal. For Solomon, it was as though the universe had conspired to remind him of the wife he had cast aside, the woman who had risen from betrayal, while he drowned in disgrace. Cynthia's career soared. Her first collection was hailed as a masterpiece of resilience, capturing emotions in fabric that resonated with audiences worldwide. Invitations poured in from Paris, Milan, and New York, establishing her as a force in the fashion industry. Her twins, now lively and curious, became the center of her world, often inspiring her work. Interviews praised her as a woman of grace, though she always remained careful not to air her private story. She let her work and dignity speak for themselves. With Alexander's steadfast support, she expanded her brand, launching boutiques that carried her signature style, elegance rooted in strength. She created jobs, empowered young designers, and became a symbol of perseverance. Society, once quick to pity her, now looked at her with admiration and envy. Cynthia had reclaimed her identity, not as Solomon's discarded wife, but as a woman who had built her empire on resilience and love. Her rise was not fueled by bitterness, but by purpose. She had become a beacon for others, proof that betrayal could be transformed into power. Where Solomon fell, Cynthia soared, her success a quiet testimony to the choices she had made and the courage she had embraced. Desperation finally drove Solomon to Cynthia's door. Stripped of wealth, abandoned by Sharon, and humiliated by society, he appeared one evening unannounced, his once proud demeanor replaced by defeat. With trembling hands, he begged her for forgiveness, claiming he wanted to be part of the children's lives, to rebuild a family he had so carelessly destroyed. His words spilled like broken glass, sharp with regret, but hollow with desperation. Cynthia listened silently, her twins watching curiously from behind her. For a moment, she saw the man she had once loved, the father of the children she adored, but the wounds of betrayal remained fresh. His plea was not born of love, but of ruin, a man seeking refuge in the very woman he had shattered. She refused to let him use her as a lifeline for his failures. Her rejection was calm but firm. She told him she had forgiven him for her own peace, but forgiveness did not mean return. Solomon left her home that night, broken by the realization that he had lost not only his marriage, but also the respect and love of the woman he once thought replaceable. In the weeks that followed, Alexander quietly stood by Cynthia, offering stability without pressure. He never pushed her to make commitments, but his actions spoke louder than words. He was there for the twins' school events, their illnesses, their birthdays, treating them as though they were his own. His love was steady, selfless, and free of the arrogance that had once defined her relationship with Solomon. Slowly, Cynthia allowed herself to see him not just as a friend or ally, but as a partner she had always deserved. When Alexander finally confessed his love, it was without grand gestures or public spectacle. It was in the quiet of her studio, surrounded by sketches and fabrics, where he told her he admired not only her strength but also her heart. For Cynthia, the decision was clear. She chose a future where her dignity remained intact, where her children grew in a home filled with respect and genuine love. She chose Alexander, not as a replacement for her past, but as the beginning of something new. Her choice marked the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. She had been broken, humiliated, and cast aside, yet she had risen stronger than ever, choosing not bitterness but love rooted in respect. Cynthia stood on the balcony of her new home, overlooking the city skyline, her twins playing in the garden below with Alexander. The laughter of her children carried through the air, blending with the calm evening breeze. She felt a peace she had once thought impossible. Her empire was growing, her children were thriving, and her heart was whole again. The scars of betrayal had not disappeared, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they reminded her of how far she had come, of the strength she found within herself when the world tried to break her. Sharon, disgraced and abandoned, faded into obscurity, her name now a cautionary tale whispered among socialites. Solomon, stripped of power and pride, lived quietly in the shadows, a man haunted by regret and memories of what he had thrown away. Their downfall stood in stark contrast to Cynthia's rise, a reminder that choices have consequences, and betrayal leaves wounds not easily healed. For Cynthia, however, life was no longer about revenge or proving her worth to those who doubted her. It was about new beginnings, raising her children with love, building a future with Alexander, and embracing the woman she had become. From ashes, she had risen. From heartbreak, she had built a legacy. Her story was no longer one of betrayal, but of triumph, dignity, and the unwavering power of choosing her own happiness. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.